Welcome to Elizabeth Fry Week 2024. We wanted to take a moment to spend some time acknowledging the Indigenous lands on which we are all situated. The Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies' main office is located on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Nation, which is colonially known to many as Ottawa, Ontario. And although the Algonquin territory remains home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people from across Turtle Island, we do like to acknowledge that it is the traditional land and nation of the Algonquin peoples. And again, while our main office is located on this territory, our work is done across the country. And so our work takes place on the traditional territories of many different nations. Abolition in Action is really something that we see as providing people with the supports and the services that they need on the ground.
When we're talking about prison abolition in Canada, we're not talking about a country which wouldn't have systems to respond to harm. We're talking about building a country that would have effective systems to respond to harm. For us, public safety means everyone in the public, and this includes the women and gender diverse people who become incarcerated in Canada, and their families and their communities. Most of the women and gender diverse people who become incarcerated in Canada are incarcerated as a result of unmet human and social needs. We are responding as a society to these unmet needs by putting people in cages, where they're fractured from their families, where they're given a host of social signals that they're undeserving of being members of our community, where they're prevented from pursuing their dreams, from building their education, from gaining vocational skills, and from participating meaningfully in society, where they're moved through processes we call geographic dislocation into new areas where they don't know anyone, and then are released facing a host of new challenges, preventing them from gaining employment, rebuilding relations with their families, and ultimately being permanently ostracized from society. This isn't a social solution that I believe any person in Canada would accept if they understood the system. Unfortunately, incarceration is an incredibly invisibilized issue, but both of our systems, the federal and the provincial system, are exhausted. We're over incarcerating people in Canada to such an unfathomable and sad extent that not only are the outcomes for the individuals who become incarcerated incredibly sad and unacceptable, but the systems are expensive, they're overwhelmed, they're costing, from a fiscal perspective, our country a huge amount of unnecessary resources. And so many people may not think about prisons as a public safety issue. We invite you to learn with us over the week about how prisons are a public safety issue for everyone in Canada. We're not incarcerating people in Canada because they pose a risk to the community. 50% of people in prisons designated for women at the federal level are Indigenous. In provincial systems, these numbers and percentages raise drastically. At the provincial level, about half of individuals who are incarcerated are never convicted of anything at all. We continue to see inquests that respond to loss of life, people dying in custody at both the provincial and federal levels. When we punish people, when we harm them and tell them that they're no longer members of our community, the outcomes are awful at every scale. Not only are the outcomes dismal for people who are incarcerated, and not only are they expensive, but the people who work in the system are also plagued by incredibly elevated rates of addiction and mental health.
I mean, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not we should just take the system that many agree is failing, both failing the people who are in the prisons, but failing to satisfy our desire for public safety for all. And so how do we get from a discussion about trying to reform that system to trying to fund and encourage different ways of responding to harm in our community?
You'll learn throughout the week about our 22 Elizabeth Fry societies who work every day to build the programs and services that keep more people from being incarcerated, that remove people from cycles of incarceration. And this is what works. This is what the evidence has always demonstrated has worked. When you believe in people, when you provide them care and hope and the ability to be a part of a community, it works. When we invest in communities, the communities blossom.
Our organization was established in 1978, and between 1978 and the early 1990s, we were an organization that was engaged in reform work. We were certainly going into the prisons or looking to better the conditions of confinement for the people who were within those prisons. When there was a prison that was developed specifically to imprison women, which was called the Prison for Women in Kingston. We were going into that prison and we were monitoring conditions of confinement therein. Also, we worked alongside the government to develop a seminal document that helped people understand what we wanted out of a correctional system for women. And we called that document Creating Choices. Quite soon after that document, which was supposed to revolutionize corrections for women in Canada, we noticed at our organization that despite all of the aspirations and all of the work that had gone into that document, that in fact, the goals of that document were not being met. And so in 1993, our organization was frustrated that the hard work that had been done to produce that document had been in vain. And so our organization passed a resolution with regards to our position on prison abolition. And that resolution in 1993, so quite a long time ago, recognized that prisons had consistently failed and were unable to effectively assist in the goal of rehabilitation of the people who were contained within their walls. And the resolution also recognized that prisons appeared pretty much overall to be punitive, nor were we meeting the goal of, or the stated goal of deterrence, as we saw that many people were returning to prison over and over again. And it is for that reason that we come today to the theme of the Elizabeth Fry Week 2024, which is Abolition in Action.
Countries that rely on incarceration less don't report less safe communities. They report increased public safety because these countries are investing in social systems. They're investing in care.
We want to really dispel the myth that prison abolition is a negative thing, that prison abolition is something to be feared.
So the question is about what kind of society do we want to live in and how do we build safety?
Let us think about how the local Elizabeth Fry societies every day across the country, in the caring, giving work that they do, in the programming that they provide, are building the kind of world that we would like to see.
Welcome to Elizabeth Fry Week 2024.